I went to secondary school and went to university in Nigeria. The teacher is always at the center. In fact, it is even worse in our higher education. The lecturers become small god. They rule us like a god. They see themselves as the source of knowledge. In this model, knowledge is treated as a gift to be deposited into the student.
How to transform the cotton, the material you harvest from your agricultural product, and transform it into clothing. This was done in pre-colonial Africa, in pre-colonial Benin, in pre-colonial Esan. This cloth that you are seeing here, which is known as the Esan cloth, was created entirely in Esan. The material that you need to be able to create this cloth were planted among the Esan people.
They imposed their curriculum on us, and that curriculum has now conditioned us to look up to them and to serve their capitalist and industrial age, whereby the issue of employment came into our system and we start looking for a white-collar job. Good morning, viewers across the globe. You are welcome to today's discussion. Today, we are looking at a very important aspect of education in Africa. As we all know that most of the African continent, with the exception of Ethiopia, were colonized by the imperialists. Therefore, there is a great impact on our educational system in Africa. Today, we are going to focus on decolonization for critical thinking skills development, which we subtitle as Developing Critical Thinking Pedagogy in Africa. Why is this important? We live in a day and age, in the 21st century, that one of the greatest skills that is required by professionals graduating into the labor market is the ability to develop critical thinking that will lead to creativity and innovation. But what we find out, due to the colonized curriculum in Africa, majority of our graduates from African curriculum are failing to develop the critical thinking skills. So our focus today is to look at the problem, how colonization has led to the suppression of development of critical thinking skills. And therefore, we now put forward a pedagogy that leads to development of critical thinking skills. My name is Sir Professor Oluwafemi Esan. I'm a professor of transformational psychology and education, the founder and vice chancellor of Royal London University. One of our major agenda in Royal London University is the mission to decolonize the curriculum in the third world. So let's have some definition before we go further. We are looking now at what does it mean to decolonize the curriculum with a special focus in Africa. Decolonizing the curriculum in Africa involves challenging and restructuring educational system to remove colonial legacies and incorporate African perspective, histories, and knowledge system. Now, this process includes recognizing and addressing the power dynamics that have privileged Eurocentric knowledge, diversifying curriculum to include non-Western and local thinkers, also re-evaluating the pedagogical approaches to make them more relevant to the continent development needs. Now, the key elements will include us to re-examine colonial history, its impact, leading to the promotion of our African languages, and also developing more context-specific educational goals that align with African realities and aspirations. Ladies and gentlemen, a sad reality that happened to us today in Africa in the post-independent era is the neo-colonization of our curriculum. And that new colonization has led to the lack of development of critical thinking skills. Our focus today is looking at critical thinking skills. And why is it that our graduates are lacking critical thinking skills when they graduate from our universities in Africa? Again, decolonization pedagogy in Africa involves shifting educational paradigm to center around African consciousness, languages, and cultures, rather than perpetuating colonial era knowledge system. This is achieved by critically examining and dismantling Eurocentric canons reclaiming indigenous knowledge, and transforming curricula and classroom practices to create more relevant, equitable, and empowering learning experience for our students. And foster pedagogical disobedience, that is, actively resist and refuse to perpetuate the epistemological desire of colonial educational system by using teaching methods that challenge the dominant narrative of the Eurocentric discourse. Yeah, this is pedagogy. Now we'll now move from decolonization of the curriculum and then to decolonization pedagogy in Africa. But before we go further, let's look at the damage that was done to us. You remember that when the imperialists came to Africa, they introduced an educational system to us. With that educational system, it has an hidden agenda. In the history and the principles of curriculum development, there's what you call hidden curriculum. Let's look at the junction at the hidden curriculum of colonization. The hidden curriculum of colonization refers to the unstated norms, values, beliefs, and practices embedded within educational systems and societal structures that implicitly transmit and reinforce colonial ideologies and power dynamics, even after former colonial rule has ended. These implicit lessons often work to validate Western perspective as being universal and also superior, while it marginalizes the knowledge system, culture, and histories of the colonized people. What does this simply mean? Every curriculum that you are exposed to condition your thinking. Now, the hidden curriculum of colonization is a mental conditioning that reinforces colonial power dynamics in terms of supremacy. Now, what does this mean in a lay term? It simply means that our curriculum has conditioned us into what we call colonial mentality, which is an internalized inferiority complex. What happened to us, as we can see, our graduates are always looking forward to the colonial master. We are always looking for a white-collar job when we finish. Don't forget, the same hidden curriculum has led us to the mental conditioning of looking for 9 to 5 jobs, whereby our graduates are also looking for jobs. They're not looking for entrepreneurship. That is one of the dangers of hidden curriculum of colonization. It conditions us to look for jobs so that we are not creative and innovative to deploy ourselves. As we continue, you will see this in this discourse today. Then how do we address this hidden curriculum? By challenging assumptions behind existing curricula, including a broader range of global perspective and knowledge system, engaging students as active partners in co-creating the curriculum. Also, reflecting on the political implications of pedagogical approaches and institutional practices. Also, don't forget that in the philosophy of curriculum development, there's always a political undertone to every curriculum. Now, let's move to the development of critical thinking skills and why is it important. Developing critical thinking skills involve actively questioning assumptions, analyzing information, considering different perspectives through practice like active listening and reflective thinking. By breaking down complex problems, seeking diverse viewpoints, and logically evaluating information, you can improve your analytical reasoning, problem solving, and decision-making ability. That is critical thinking skills. What we find out, our graduates in Africa, which all my viewers from the continent of Africa, you can attest to this. Why do we have graduates that they are not innovative? Why do we have engineers that cannot create products? Why do we have computer scientists graduating from our universities and they cannot even create, software programming, and some of them cannot even look at the hardware of the computer? What is really lacking? We are lacking critical thinking skills. And how do we do that? You actually seek out and understand the very point. But when you look at what has happened within the classroom, the problem that leads to the lack of
AI, you can
create has to do with what we call the banking model of education. which favor the colonial legacy. Now, the colonial master, they introduced a pedagogy called the banking model of education. Now, it's a term coined by Paulo Freire to describe a traditional teacher-centered approach where students are seen as passive recipients of information from a teacher who acts as the sole source of knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, our viewers, our listeners, does this sound familiar? I went to secondary school and went to university in Nigeria. The teacher is always at the center. In fact, it is even worse in our higher education. The lecturers become small god. They rule us like a god. They see themselves as the source of knowledge. In this model, knowledge is treated as a gift to be deposited into the student. Empty minds. A process that Ferreira argues inhibits critical thinking and reinforces oppression by promoting passive acceptance and discouraging questioning. Let me take time at this junction. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa in the post-colonial era, we are still neo-colonized by the banking model of education. This is a major problem that prevents the development of critical thinking skills because the lecturers is at the center and they reinforce their oppressive behavior by promoting passive acceptance of whatever you are saying to them. You cannot question them. They discourage questioning. When you question them, they see you as being antagonized to them and you want to hurt their ego. It's a serious problem today. Imagine in this 21st century, African universities are still practicing the banking model of education, which is a reinforcement of oppression. Ferreira argued that this model serves the interest of the oppressor by creating a mindset of submission and automatic acceptance of received wisdom, which facilitates the propagation of dominant ideology. This is what is happening to us. The lecturer comes and stands in the center, and he tells you whatever he wants to say. You cannot question the lecturer. There's no room for argument. There's no room for critical analysis of his ideology or content he's teaching. To make it worse, he also asks you to buy the handout, of which if you don't buy the handout, you will fail. Now, if you even write outside the handout, it will also fail you. Tell me, how are we going to develop critical thinking skills when we are being confined and be suppressed to the so-called wisdom of the lecturer? You see that? Again, let's look at the danger, the oppressive, colonized pedagogy called banking model of education. It is also teacher-centered. The teacher is the authority who possesses knowledge, while students are passive receivers. You see that? Passive students are viewed as empty vessels, tabula rasa, or containers in which knowledge is deposited, rather than as active participants in their own learning. The students we are all passive. We all be looking like Alice in the Wonderland. I remember those days in the university. I studied medicine. I spent 4 years in medical school in Nigeria. I did my preclinicals in Nigeria before I left Nigeria. And I remember we rushed down to the hall. Everybody will listen carefully, jostling, looking for seats. We will be there as early as 6 a.m. at the door. Even the class is crowded. And the teacher, the lecturer, is the alpha and the omega, is the final authority. There's no room for analysis. There's no room for group work or critical thinking or presentation because even the room is overcrowded. Do you see us? So there is suppression. So they see us as being passive. And their mentality is that knowledge is a commodity. They see knowledge as a prepared product to be transferred from the teacher to the student. Also, this leads to suppression of creativity and critical thinking. This model discourages creativity, critical analysis, and the ability to question the status quo. You dare not question, or they will fail you. What a sad reality of what we went through. And it's happening today. So we now see that in Africa, there's a lack of critical thinking skills in Africa curriculum, stem from a combination of factors, including curricula that prioritize rote memorization over analysis. Let me pause. Remember, if you look at our assessment, we are given essays to be written, And what we do, we memorize. It is about memorization. There is no critical thinking, memorization, there is no synthesis, there is no analysis, there is no evaluation. You memorize and you just go to the exam hall and then you dump it there. And if they ask you the following day, you don't even remember anything again. So understanding is not there. As we are going to see, using blue taxonomy in this discourse, you will see where the problem lies in the pedagogical approach. And what is killing our activity today in Africa is the banking model of education that we are still following the colonial legacy. Also, systemic challenges like large class size, which I've just said, a lack of adequate teacher training in critical thinking pedagogy. That is it. Our lecturers are not trained in critical thinking pedagogy. Cultural norms, historical focus on transferring Western knowledge also contribute to it, leading to a gap between educational goals and classroom practice. This is what we are fighting. Now, the lack of critical thinking skills in Africa curricula. We have said it, rote learning versus critical thinking. Many curricula in Africa are designed to emphasize memorization, you see that, and competitive exams, which discourages independent thought and critical analysis. I just said it, the lecturer gives you his handout, you buy it. You dare not write anything outside that handout, he will fail you. That leads us to what? The lack of teacher training. Educators often lack necessary training and competence to teach critical thinking skills effectively. What is sad reality? Curriculum is also overload. Dense curricula and time constraints limit opportunities for teachers to go beyond coverage and foster deeper cognitive engagement with the student. You see that? Because they are rushing to finish their handout and then get you outside. Then we also see systemic and cultural barriers, classroom conditions, which I've said it, large classroom size, other systemic issues in that a teacher ability to promote critical thinking. Cultural context is there. Cultural norms, a lack of contextualized critical thinking definition, even a focus on basic needs can affect the implementation of critical thinking instruction. Western influence, a strong emphasis on Western knowledge system, a requirement for faculty to publish in Western outlets. You see that can limit the integration of critical thinking relevant to the African context. And that's those are the things that really stop us. Then how do we solve this? Now, Paulo Ferreira, in his book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, offers some solution. So the solution Paulo Ferreira offered to the banking model of education that is suppression, that is oppressive, which followed the colonial legacy, he gave what we call alternative problem-posing education system. In contrast, Ferreira promoted a problem-posing or dialogical approach. Now, this method includes active participation. That is, both teachers and students co-learn and engage in dialogue. That's it. If we are going to develop critical thinking skills, practices in the classroom, our pedagogy must be student-centered. Based on what? Active participation. Critical analysis. Students are encouraged to analyze and understand the world around them through critical thinking, grounded in their own experience. Real-world relevance. Learning is connected to the student lives and culture, which leads to critical consciousness. The goal is to develop a critical consciousness where students can analyze their own lives, the world around them, making connection between their personal experiences, and the broader social and political context. Very, very important. Let's look at what we call critical thinking pedagogy itself. How does it look like? Critical thinking pedagogy is a teaching philosophy that goes beyond rote learning, that is memorization, to develop students' ability to analyze and question societal norms, power structures, and inequalities. It involves a shift from a teacher as authority model, that is in the banking model of education by the colonial master, to a collaborative one where students and teachers are co-learners, which will foster critical consciousness and encourage action to change unjust system. This approach uses methods like problem solving, discussion, real-world analysis to build both the skills and the motivation for students to become agents of social change in their learning experience. So we have to embrace the critical thinking pedagogy, and it takes what? Learning. What it takes learning and skill acquisition. So the way forward here is our teacher training. We need to train teachers in critical thinking pedagogy. And when they do that, how do they do that? They analyze power. Critical pedagogy encourages students and teachers to examine how power structure, inequalities, and oppression manifest in both society and the classroom. Learner agency. Students are viewed as active participants in their own learning, not just passive recipients of information as in the banking model of education of the oppressor. Teacher-student collaboration should be encouraged. Teachers act as what? Facilitators rather than authoritative dispenser of knowledge, with students and teachers working together as co-learners. Theory and practice. Learning is seen as both theoretical and practical, requiring students to not only understand but also to act on their knowledge to create a more just society. And this really calls for attitudinal disposition change in our teachers, in our lecturers in Africa. And this is going to be a major issue and challenges, because we need to move on. And to do this, in our teaching method, we have to embrace what we call the use of Bloom taxonomy, okay, in developing our lesson plan. This is for our teacher training. Our teacher has to be trained in the use of Bloom taxonomy. I'm going to show you taxonomy. If you look at Bloom taxonomy, which is a pyramid of cognitive skill development, if you look at us in Africa, at the base of the pyramid, we are operating at the remembering, and it's rote learning, memorization, which is what we do. We recall fact and basic concepts. And you can see this in our assessment method in Africa, in a colonized curriculum that is based on essay writing. So that's test. You see that? We are only learning to recall fact and basic concept. And that's where we are. And it is obvious. You will see us. We are given essay to write in the exam. They write in the exam 3 hours. You memorize and you pour out the fact and the basic concept. There's no room for critical analysis, because we don't give opportunity for students to show their understanding, where they explain or concept or apply and move to analysis, evaluate, and create. You will notice that in the African setting, today we are still operating at the baser level of the cognitive skills, and that's the problem that we have. Our teachers need to be trained on how to pitch their class and their teaching, not only to remember, to move to understanding, from understanding to application, from application to analysis, from analysis to evaluation, and then from evaluation to creativity, to create. That's where students can produce new or original work, and this is what is missing. You see, we are not innovative and creative in our graduates. They lack innovation and creativity because they are being taught to focus only on the basic, which is just to remember what is our reality. And this has to be changed, because for us to move on in Africa, we have to move to the creating, and is producing new or original work. And this has to do with the way we are taught. So we have to adopt a pedagogy that is based on Bloom taxonomy, that we move from remembering to understanding, from understanding to applying, from applying to analyzing, from analyzing to evaluating, from evaluating to creating. This is a skill that our teachers need to acquire if they are going to teach us and our graduates to embark and to embrace critical thinking skills. Once they are able to grab these critical thinking skills, they will be able to move up through the cognitive pyramid of skill development. You see that because the goal here is to make sure that the students are able to create, so that they can design, they can assemble, they can construct, they can conjure, they can develop, they can formulate, they can author, they can investigate new products to solve our indigenous problem. That is what is happening. We need a critical pedagogy based on this Bloom taxonomy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Oluwafemi. This has really been an interesting conversation, the one relating to education and miseducation. Of course, many people in the African diaspora now, they will remember the work by the famous African-American Carnegie Whitson, who wrote the famous book, The Miseducation of the Negro. Because when many Africans talk about education, or even when Westerners talk about education in Africa, they usually look at it as if the kind of education in Africa is comparable to the type that they are giving in Europe or in other parts of the world. But it is not true. It's not the same. Because education, from the general basic of it, is supposed to be light. But now, you as an oppressor, you cannot give light to the person you want to oppress. It will be counterproductive. It wouldn't even make any sense. So that it go back to what we often say here, that we need to start from contesting what they are presented to us. Because you can't tell me that you want to fight war with me, you give me the instrument to fight you. It is not possible. It doesn't even make any sense too. So this is where I think we need a holistic approach to this understanding of education, of pedagogy, of what does it mean from our own understanding. Again, now I'm going to drag you to where you are coming from, where we are coming from, Africa. How do you see education in Yoruba culture? Because now we want people to be grounded. Please explain to us.
Again, if you look at the pre-colonial era, okay, and in the pre-colonial era, there are archaeological evidence that shows creativity as the outcome of our indigenous knowledge system. The brass, metal, the metal industrial age, where we have, construction of pyramid, construction of what we call in the cultural engineering. You see that already there are elements of creativity as the outcome of our indigenous Yoruba education. So we have been creative before the invasion of the white man. Yeah.
You made mention of brass, but just because I was trying to search for it, but time is not permitting me. I will not be able to do that. Because one of the Obas of Benin, at a time, not the current Oba, this is pre-colonial system now. So he instituted a school of teaching people how to create brass and all the different artifacts that were created in Benin are not random. It was part of life of the people. It was a kind of something that you need to learn to do. There was school for it. This is pre-colonial Africa now. But I don't know if the present Benin, as we speak in 2025, have a school that teaches people about this handcraft. So that we can say, you want to graduate, you go to this school in Benin City today to learn about the brass. Because the people have always done this. They know how to do it. And of course, we can also go back to ancient history in Esan, in many other parts, how people, the cotton work, for example, they had to transform the cotton, the material you harvest from the crop, from the agricultural product, and transform it into clothing. This was done in pre-colonial Africa, in pre-colonial Benin, in pre-colonial Esan. Yes. I don't know of any school in Esan, which is where I'm coming from, that teaches people how to do this. Because when people think of this, there is this famous Esan cloth. Let me see if I can search for that and show you so that people understand what I'm talking about here. Okay, Esan cloth. Esan cloth. Okay, yeah, of course, there are many of them online. Okay, let me show you, because people should be able to understand that what we are talking about is not far away from this world. We know how to do things, but unfortunately, things have gone wrong, that we don't know anything how to do these things anymore. Okay, this is what I'm talking about now. This cloth, okay, this is actually coming from one of the articles that I've written. This cloth that you are seeing here, which is known as the Esan cloth, was created entirely in Esan. The material that you need to be able to create this cloth were planted among the Esan people. So the Esan women actually need to weave this cloth into what the Esan men and Esan people will wear. It's called Ukbesan. Now, this is, people will look at it as maybe we are talking about just mere tradition. No, we're talking about education. We're talking about how do you take this basic concept of planting something, taking in, weaving in, becoming a cloth that you can wear. Where have those knowledge gone?
Okay, I will let you know. I've said it before. Let's set the background. So, in the pre-colonial, it just shows us a perfect example of productivity, innovation, and creativity in the pre-colonial era. And this came from our indigenous knowledge system, our indigenous education. People are trained, they acquire skills, and they become creativity, and they become entrepreneurs, isn't it? Now, the white man came, the imperialists came, and they imposed on us a colonized curriculum. Now, I've said it, in the history of curriculum development, before you introduce a curriculum, the first step is to carry out initial diagnostic assessment of the learning needs of the people, of which the white man did not do that for us. There was no initial diagnostic assessment of our learning needs that was conducted before they came and they imposed their curriculum on us. So it is obvious. So what happened? They now imposed their curriculum on us, and that curriculum has now conditioned us to look up to them and to serve their capitalist and industrial age, whereby the issue of employment came into our system and we start looking for a white-collar job. That has led to us, we neglected and we lost our indigenous creativity. That's what happened to us.
I want us to remain there for a few seconds. You see, I was saying before that they didn't even give us their educational system. They codify it to be less, in the sense that even when we finish the educational system, we are not like them. We are not like what we used to be. The educational system that the European brought to Africa was deliberately designed to confuse a people. Now, let me expand on this. Because in the United States, people go to school, and at the end of the day, they produce things. In Europe, but in the time that the Europeans came to Africa, by the time they started to know Africa, they have been producing things. We have been producing things too.
Yeah.
But if we pass through the education that they gave us, we are not going to be able to create nuclear bomb in Africa.
No.
We are not going to be able to design astronauts and the spacecraft that will send people from Accra to the space.
No.
We're not going to be able to build sophisticated bridges. This is that we are not even getting European education. We are getting an education that is not European, it's not African, it's nothing. It's completely a confusion. And they are doing it on purpose. Can you please speak on that?
Thank you. So you will see that in my analysis, when let me quickly show us that again from the Bloom taxonomy. You will see that in this analysis here, when you look at the pedagogy that was introduced to us, they focus on memorization. You see that memorization, recalling of fact and basic concepts. You know, we state, we repeat, we memorize, or we duplicate, we define. And when you look at the Bloom taxonomy of cognitive skill development, look at the step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So to get to the creativity is 5 steps, but Africa has been locked down on this remembering. You see that? Remembering. Even understanding is not the focus of our assessment in the colonized curriculum. We don't focus on how to explain ideas or concepts. This is it. It's just define, duplicate, list, memorize, repeat, and you state, you regurgitate what is given to you by the lecturer. It was a deliberate attempt, because this is the banking system of education that we are operating, whereby you are seen to be as an empty vessel for them to deposit. So there is no creativity. Now, for you to have creativity, you have to move to understanding, then you are able to apply, you are able to analyze, you are able to evaluate, and then you now move to creativity that leads to production of new products, which we don't have in Africa. That is the problem, sir.
And I think this is very important for people to understand, particularly our friends in Europe, our friends that are in the Western world, who often proud themselves to say, okay, we brought education to Africa. Now, when you start kicking against that educational system, it appears as if you are kicking against education in general, but that is not what we are saying. What we are saying is that the education that was brought to Africa is not an education that will bring development to the people. It's an education that will continue to reinforce a retrogression, that will continue to reinforce a kind of a subsistent way. How do I put it? A kind of education that will always make up subservient to the European. It's not a European education by that I mean, it's not an education that is going to make you autonomy. It's not an education that when you finish, you go to France, for example, you will be able to compete with the same level of French people that brought you the same education. It's not that type of education. It's not an education that because we were colonized by the English, we are practicing the English type of education, which means by the time we finish, we'll be able to do the same thing that the English people are doing. That is not the education we are talking about. The education they brought to us were so downgraded to the point that we will always become children, infants, that need to be manipulated. This is what we are kicking against. It's not like you taught me how to read. Now, if I say I don't like the education, it's as if maybe I'm kicking against the idea that I can read. That is not what I'm saying. I am saying that you make me a baby that you can always manipulate. That is the educational system. All right. If we say that is the situation, I want you to help us understand this critical thinking. I think somebody need to get that basic clearer. What are we talking about this critical thinking? What does that mean?
Yeah, if I go back to the illustration that I just used, using blue taxonomy, you will see that the element of critical thinking starts from understanding the concept. So imagine when you are in the classroom, you are taught a concept, okay? But do you understand? Now, when you pitch that concept, that idea, you target it towards understanding. Now, the students who are able to understand, when they move from understanding, they now are able to apply, okay? When they move to, that is the application of that understanding in real life situation, in a new situation, they are able to execute, they are able to implement, and they are able to solve that problem. Now, when they now move from application, you now teach them on how to analyze. They become analytical. That is, they can organize, they can compare, they can contrast, they can distinguish, they can examine, okay? And then they are able to evaluate. Now, you will notice that as you move from understanding to application to analysis and to evaluation and leading to creativity, those are elements of critical analytic skills. Yes, you are able to analyze and critique concept and phenomenon. But the danger here is that we are still operating the banking system of education in Africa. We are only at the baser level of cognitive skills of development. That is, recalling of fact and basic concept. We don't analyze.
All right, this is very important, and I'm sure we're going to come back to this particular conversation on education again. But we're going to be looking at it from an indigenous knowledge system base purely, in the sense that when we bring out a concept, I want us to take it home to be able to explain it from the level of the people, from where we are. Because now, I don't need somebody to tell me that it took an education for people in my town, people in my village, people in Esan, where I'm coming from, to take a cloth, not even a cloth this time, to take a crop that was planted to a cloth that you can wear. You needed to understand that. You can't tell me that these people were stupid. If they were stupid, how did they manage to do that?
Yeah.
So we need to go back to that. When we talk about construction of road, I don't want somebody to start using the bridge in Washington to explain that to me. I want us to see if there is anything we can pick among the people. Because I want people to see what we are talking about. Okay, now, in 2010, I wrote a book that I titled that Development in Africa, My Hands Are Clean. Even though I was mostly focusing on Africa, looking at where we might be wrong in our life. Maybe sometimes we are very, very fast to criticize the European, but I say, where can we be wrong to? We need to have a thought in this to be able to get it right at the end of the day. I was saying, if we give education to people in Ghana and we are teaching them about snow, we are confusing these people because the children in Ghana have no way of understanding what is snow. They have never been there. Exactly. You can't do that.
Yeah. But that's what the colonized curriculum does. Yeah. So the colonized curriculum is designed, you will see during my discourse, I talk about the hidden curriculum. So every writer of a curriculum has a hidden agenda. Now, the hidden curriculum are the outcome of the curriculum that is not explicitly stated in the curriculum itself. What it does is that it conditions your thinking. Any exposure to a particular curriculum leads to a mental conditioning. And that mental conditioning now becomes the outcome of that curriculum, which is unconscious to the student going through that curriculum. So I'll give an example of what we just give now. When we started learning alphabet in our early year education in Africa, our alphabet was based on the Eurocentric alphabet. A for apple, B for ball. A for apple. Which apple were we shown? We were shown apple in the Europe. So from that very early years, the seed of inferiority complex has been sown. That you are not looking for apple. You have been unconsciously conditioned to see apple as the European apple, as the standard apple. But there are other alphabets in my neighborhood, in my culture, in my indigenous knowledge system that I will relate that alphabet to. But because that alphabet has been given to me from the colonial master, don't forget, is the backing system of education. The colonial master, the teacher, is the superior, is the source of knowledge. Mine is not to receive. I'm an empty vessel to be deposited. A for apple. Repeat after me. A for apple. B for ball. C for cat. And that's what happened to us.
You see, I think people need to settle down to reflect. A couple of years ago, I introduced the former Nigerian ambassador to Italy. His name is Ambassador Erika Warabi, because we invited him to Verona at the time. I was telling him, I said, sir, why is it that in Nigeria, we don't focus on the main thing? Because that is what I saw there, and that is what it is still today. We don't focus on the main thing. Look, I wrote an article a couple of days ago where I was looking at the current situation in Nigeria. I was saying the Nigerian political elite are playing game with the Nigerian people. They overhype the emotional situation and they make the people fight themselves as if we are really enemy, as if the Yoruba are against Igbo, the Hausa are against the Yoruba and against the Igbo. They play this game, but that is not the reality. Because if that is the reality, our politicians should be fighting too, but they are not fighting. They are perfectly going to bed among themselves. The Hausa politician and the Yoruba politician and the Igbo politician are going to bed. They are agreed, they are marrying, they are celebrating, they are going to ceremony. But the ordinary Hausa, the ordinary Igbo, and the ordinary Yoruba are fighting each other. And it's a very confusing situation because it means that somebody is playing this game perfectly, manipulating the people. So I think we need to settle down because then the ambassador was telling me, you see, in Nigeria, we're always running. And when you are running, you don't have time to reflect because for you to reflect, you need to think. And for you to think, you need to be still. Like, be still. Be fixed on a point. But that is not how we live in Nigeria. We're living in Nigeria. People. How can we do this?
It's coming from go back to the colonized curriculum. We don't develop critical thinking and reflective thinking. You see that? Critical thinking leads to reflective thinking. Now, reflective thinking leads to personal development. Let me say it again. Critical thinking leads to what? Reflective thinking. Reflective thinking leads to personal and professional development. Now, I'm a coach. One of my masters, I have a master in coaching psychology. Anybody will not grow without reflective thinking. Okay? Reflective thinking is coming from critical thinking skills. So when I look at things critically, I'm reflecting. And when I'm reflecting, I'm looking at the weaknesses and the strengths. Now, the political elite have been conditioned through the colonized curriculum themselves from the colonial mentality that they are superior from the people. They see themselves as a class from the people. Now, because the majority of the people, through the educational system, have not developed critical analysis, but now awareness is coming out. Don't get it wrong now. Because of the danger and loss of life, people are forced to critique now. So what has led to the consciousness and critical consciousness today is the danger and the crisis. One thing that happens is that if you don't critically think about your life or reflect, crisis will force you to become a critical thinker. Thank you.
I like that. which is also to say that we have hope. And the hope is in us. The hope is when you are forced to that situation where you have before you a big war, you need to think. If you don't think you are literally going to walk, then you hit your head on the wall. If you don't want to walk, and hit your head on the wall, you need to figure out things.
Yeah.
This war, what is it made of? How big it is?
I'll give you a classic example.
Yeah.
2 days ago, the Minister of Defense, claimed to resign based on health grant. When we did a background check on his life, this man is a business and a politician. He has no defense training. He has never been in the arena of security. So you can see his appointment was purely political, not professional.
It's unfortunate. I also went through that too. And it kind of make one wonder. I've interviewed a lot of people here. I interviewed a military expert. He's late now. He's a Nigerian military expert from the Air Force. He told me what was happening at the point. That at the point, they were sort of just cross-connecting Nigerians' defense. They say that this happened mostly in the military. That if you are in charge of maybe strategy, they move you into marketing. They move you into communication. So that he was telling me, now imagine if a war has happened in Nigeria, if another country was attacking Nigeria, we would be like, baby, they would just have picked out on the street. Because you take somebody from his expertise, take it to area he have nothing to do. Now, for a leader to pick somebody who have no business in defense, bring it to run the defense, I don't even know where to even start. Because something as important as defense, we give it to a market woman.
Yes, because it's purely political. You see that? So the decision-making process was based on political gimmicks behind the scene. Yeah, political conversation. It tells you that tells you a lack of what? Critical thinking. Why should I put a political person,
a trader,
professional? He doesn't have it. So it shows you that the critical thinking was not used. There are other factors, which is purely political, that happen behind the scene that has brought to that. And that has led us to a national disgrace, global shame. Imagine when a minister of defense is saying that the bandits are hiding in the bush and bombs cannot catch them. They can't use bomb. Can you imagine saying that from the mouth of a defense minister? It tells you lack of critical thinking. You see that? You see dogmatic is there, and you are saying that. But like I said, the beauty of what is happening today in Africa today, crisis has forced us to become critical thinkers. We're now going through critical consciousness today in Africa because of that, and that's the beauty of crisis. Crisis will force you to change. Thank you.
In fact, I wanted to ask you a question, but the question is sort of a link to this particular one, in that who is going to develop the curriculum? Because I know we are going to come to the government.
Thank you for that question. Last year, stroke this year, I don't want to mention names. I mentioned a group of people, they call themselves in Diaspora, and they said they have this vision to go and teach Africa. So I was approached. They said they want to have an indigenous university. And the first thing I asked them, oh, do you have a teacher training qualification? They said no. Okay. Then I wonder, how do you want to start an indigenous university without professionalism and you have not acquired the skills? That's when I know that our people are very sick. They live in denial. This group of people, I offered them a teacher training. None of them applied for it for 3 months. So you now begin to see again, why are we having people? These are people in diaspora that say they want to go and rescue Africa, and they don't have the professional skills. So they are not different from the political elite. So I then begin to wonder, why are we like this? It's because of the colonial trauma. What trauma does to us? Trauma has led to lack of reflective thinking, that we don't have a culture of personal development. We don't have a culture of continuous personal and professional development. Because it is only when you practice critical thinking and reflective thinking that you can constantly invest into your personal development and also professional development. So who is going to create this curriculum? We are going to create it by ourselves. But before then, that's why we need to acquire the Western education. I've said it before, we cannot discard Western education. All what we need is what we call indigenization and contextualization of Western concepts. And to do that, it requires skill. And that is what we are lacking.
Thank you so much for that. Anyway, we already expanded on that. And also, I'm not going to be added to that because it's already clear that knowledge is supposed to be universal in most of the cases, no? Because if you want to know how to move from point A to point B, it's not everything in a way are going to change. Otherwise, we'll go to Africa and say, let's reinvent the theory of how to or what is the component of water, what is hydrogen and what is oxygen. We don't need to do that. We just need to pick it. What is at least it should anyway. Those basic concepts they should be clear. All right, now I'm looking at what can be the solution. I want you to speak more on that as we move to the end of this conversation because now we understand how complicated the situation is. What do you recommend to people?
No, not just to people now, to the whole entire third world, to not just anywhere that they've experienced colonization. In the post-colonial era, the post-independent era, the first step is to decolonize the teacher training education. The teacher training, that is non-negotiable. We have to train our teachers on how to decolonize the curriculum in the classroom, just like what we have just discussed today. So the first stage and the fundamental stage is the decolonization of teacher training education in Africa and in third world. If that is not done, we are fooling ourselves.
Thank you so much, Professor Oluwafemi. This has really been an interesting conversation. I really thank you so much for making yourself available all the time to bring education, to bring enlightenment to the people. We appreciate you so much, sir. And of course, for all of you that have listened to the end of this conversation, we say take action. Critical thinking start by you taking action because now you don't pretend that this information will suddenly enter you and start taking action in you. You are in charge. You are on the driver's seat. So you get this information, take action on it. If there is any part of it that you are curious about, you want to learn more, Professor Oluwafemi is available. He is ready to dedicate his time to teach you. Have training programs in London University. You can also reach out to us. We are available to be able to put you through if you need help. But of course, you're going to be the one to ask for it because I don't know what you need. We bring this information to your doorstep. But if you don't take any action, it remains there. It cannot do anything for you. So critical thinking also means that when somebody presents you and offer that information, take the time to start by believing that it is not even possible. Start critiquing every aspect of it until you are convinced that it is what you want to do, what you need, based on your circumstances, based on who you are, based on where you want to go. So it requires all of us to take action because we cannot allow other people to take action for us and then blame them. We have a responsibility here, a responsibility to take action about things that affect us. So I thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to this channel and make sure you also share with other people that are interested in valuable information like this. Once again, thank you so much, Professor Oluwafemi. Thank you, brother.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for your time.